In Zero Emissions Noosa, I mentioned we concentrate on two areas. So we've got two working groups that the ZENe group, as we call it, concentrates on reducing emissions from energy, and ZEN Tag, as we call it, or ZEN Transport, concentrates on reducing emissions from transport. And that's the group that do the EV Expo every year. So what are some of the projects that we're working on now to help us to get the Noosa community to zero by 2026? One is looking at the possibility of a community or local battery, and there are several reasons for doing this, because some of the areas in Noosa Shire that are doing really well in the hinterland actually produce more energy from solar in the middle of the day than can be fed back into the grid. So ostensibly that's going to waste. So we want to be able to capture that and use it in that local community. So that's one of the reasons for looking at this. Also, the grid was only built to give us energy. It wasn't built really for us to give energy back to the grid. So there's some issues around stabilisation of the electricity grid that you've probably been reading or starting to hear about. So having local or community batteries will help to keep that energy in the local area, just like we're trying to keep the money spent on energy in the local area, and help to reduce those problems. So we think community batteries would be a good way to help reduce emissions. Vivian's just started to mention about solar for strata, and one of the projects that Vivian and others are working on is making it easier for strata title complexes, whether they be business, accommodation in the holiday rental area, or permanent residents who live in strata title complexes, to be able to put on solar. There's lots of barriers to putting on solar, but probably the biggest is you have more than one household that's making the decision. In the case of Noosa Lakes Resort, a fantastic achievement. They've just installed recently a 550 kilowatt system on, I think it's 74 out of their 96 units. But that took 2 years and a lot of hard work by a number of the residents to get that over the line. So the RACV Resort is another example here in Noosa, and they're expanding their system next year. So it is possible, but the project that Vivian and others are working on is how do we make that easier for those businesses and households to be able to do that, because as we saw, we think in the Noosa Heads and Noosaville area, that's why the percentage of solar is so low, because we've got a high concentration of strata title units. So watch this space. We're also looking at the possibility of an energy hub at Perigian. Another thing that we have been doing some advocacy about is environmental upgrade agreements. And a lot of words on this slide, but basically it's a way of being able to put water efficiency and energy efficiency devices into your building, whether they be new or to retrofit them, and doing that without any upfront cost. There's a scheme that runs in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia called Environmental Upgrade Agreements, or Building Upgrade Finance, which enables people to do that. They pay the loan from the NAB or Better Building Finance, or one of the bodies that provide the loans at very low interest. They pay that back through their council rates. So it's a way of paying that off over 10 or 20 years. So we think that that would be particularly helpful for low-income households, rental properties where the landlord at the moment is probably not incentivised to put on solar or do other efficiency measures because it's the tenant that benefits, not the landlord. But with something like this, that would encourage those people to take up some of those initiatives. So we are doing some advocacy work in that space, so we'll see if we can get anywhere, because in Queensland it involves changing to government acts, which is the hard bit. ZEN Transport is particularly looking at how to help Noosa Council with its walking and cycling strategy, how to implement that. I think, Vivian, there are 396 actions in the walking and cycling strategy.
That will be completed by 2040.
We're encouraging Council to bring some of those actions forward because we think that a lot of those actions will be great ways of helping to reduce emissions. Tree planting with other stakeholders is another thing that's on our agenda. Looking at eco-anxiety research with the University of Southern Queensland. Probably the best known actions from our transport group are the things that you might have seen or you might have even participated in. Did anyone here do a trial ride on an electric bike? No? Okay. Zero Emissions Noosa did a number of trial riding groups through a grant a couple of years ago, just to introduce people to the idea of electric bikes, how they can be used in the local area, what it's like to ride an electric bike. If you go along to the EV Expo, which is in June next year, 19th of June, you will be able to see lots of...
I went last year.
Did you? Good. It's going to be bigger and better this year, and Vivian might want to say something about that in a minute. But other things that we're looking at talking to Council about is transport nodes, where, as Vivian said, people can use like their e-scooter or their e-bike and ride to the public transport and encourage more and more people onto public transport. And she's already mentioned about paid parking. So watch this space in the second half of next year. There might be a few community forums about that. The EV experience, as we call it, and the EV Expo is probably at the flagship about that. Some of the other things we're doing this year, the photo is from a business forum that we had in Climate Week in conjunction with Annie and the Council, and that was about talking to businesses about how other businesses have saved money from solar and reduced their operating costs. We've got people like, lucky to have Megan with us to be our Community Engagement Officer. Up until now we've been concentrating mainly on the internal projects that we're doing within ZEN, but now we think it's time to be out there engaging with the community. So these forums are a first step in doing that. So if you have thought it was worthwhile coming along today, tell your friends and neighbours, because in February we'll be doing the same thing at the Zero Library and also at the Pregian Beach Community House. So every month there will be a topic delivered in 3 different places across the Shire. So part of our community outreach. We lobby whichever level of government we need to and who will listen to us. So we have a good working relationship with Noosa Council. We've also done some lobbying with the state government. We work with the energy regulators, and we're in discussions at the moment with Energex about the possibility of a community battery and what that involves and whether or not we can do that. We have a couple of people who gather data, so that's where the postcode series has come from, to help us analyse what's happening. And if you haven't, have a look at our website. There's some great case studies there, particularly if you know people in business. We've got a number of videos there about our business case studies. So what can we do as everyday citizens in Noosa to help get to net zero by 2026? All of these things. Some of you have shared with us this morning some of the things that you're doing, which is fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And we have a great website with lots of information, as I mentioned. We also are looking for more people to help us with our work. So if you're interested in the possibility of joining one of our project groups, please let us know. We also need people to come along to things like this and help be our welcoming committee to the community when we do these forums. So we'd love to have you join. Also, if you're not got the time or not wanting to get involved in projects, become a member of ZEN, $20 a year, big investment, and that helps support our work.